Hello. Okay, Venom, The Last Dance, the third and final film in Sony's Venom trilogy. And I'm going to admit something here. I want to start off with saying I've not actually watched the first two movies. I know, shock. I started watching the first one. It was okay, but I just fell asleep halfway through it, and then the second movie I've kind of seen bits and pieces of, but I haven't seen them in their entirety. But yeah, I checked out Venom The Last Dance on the big screen, a little bit late getting around to it. This one is directed by Marcel, who wrote the scripts for the previous two. And so the synopsis reads: Eddie and Venom are on the run, hunted by both of their worlds, and with the net closing in, the duo are forced into a devastating decision that will bring the curtains down on Venom and Eddie's last dance. So I'll be honest, I wasn't entirely sure if I needed to watch those first two movies. I've heard, they are pretty goofy from what I actually have seen of them when it comes to sort of kind of the humour. They're a little bit silly, over the top. They've got a kind of 90s, early 2000s vibe about them. But a lot of people say they're fun. And you know what? I actually was craving something a little bit mindless and a little bit fun. Something that I could just really just turn my brain off and be entertained for 2 hours. So I was actually quite looking forward to checking this movie out. I'm a massive fan of Tom Hardy, and I actually don't mind the character of Venom. And I felt like the movie did a really good job at sort of throwing someone like myself, who's never watched those previous two movies, into the chaos and really giving me a gist at where Eddie Brock is at, and just throwing me into what is a very chaotic ride. So, I want to start off with one of the main positives for me with Venom The Last Dance, and that is the relationship, the dynamic between Venom and Tom Hardy's character Eddie Brock. I found it to be quite funny. I really like the kind of the comedic back and forth between each other, between the characters, and I just like how Venom was brought to life through the voice performance by Tom Hardy. And I just found that sort of aspect of the movie to be incredibly fun, and I could see what they were attempting to do in regards to this story, with it being the conclusion and that final chapter, and having that kind of injecting that heart, really, that big beating heart, which is these two characters and their relationship, and that attempt is there. And I found myself going along on the ride purely because of Tom Hardy and this relationship with Venom. There was just this warmth there between the two characters that I really enjoyed, and I just really enjoyed seeing how they brought this relationship, this dynamic to life. Unfortunately, when it comes to the rest of the movie, and when it comes to all of the other characters within this chaos and the actual story itself, I just found Venom The Last Dance to be an incredibly dull experience, which, saying that out loud, sounds really bizarre, because this movie doesn't stop. When I say chaotic, it is very chaotic. But a lot of that I'm referring to how this story plays out, and how it introduces us to these new characters, and how it shifts back and forth to different places and all of that. Everything about this movie felt very chaotic, and it wasn't really holding together. It felt like in many ways they weren't quite sure what it was they really wanted to do with this movie. At times it almost felt like they weren't quite sure if this was going to be the final Venom. It also felt like a last minute kind of story. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of bigger things that's going on behind the scenes, with this other villain in the background, and his story and that. And you've got these characters, and there'd be a moment with one character, and it's quite a nice moment, because she's really coming to terms with what it is she's just found out about, these aliens coming to the planet and that. And it was like, oh, there's a bit of humanity here, but it also felt like a different kind of movie. So it was a little bit of a mishmash of different types of films as well. And so it just felt like a very kind of last minute kind of rush of getting a story together, which is very 90s. You know, the story is very generic 90s. You've seen it all before. And that's also reflected within the dialogue. And so whether it's intentional or not, I don't know. But it very much felt, it had that kind of very 90s, early 2000s superhero DNA about it. And so there was nothing really new about it. And I think that really sort of played into how dull this experience was for me, because it wasn't really giving me anything that we've not seen a million times before and we've seen a hell of a lot better. But there were aspects about it that I liked. I liked the attempt at injecting heart when it comes to that relationship with Eddie Brock and Venom. I do like there was an attempt there at sort of creating that feeling of what these characters, these human beings are feeling emotionally when they're realizing that actually we could end up being invaded by this alien force. But it also really stood out of the overall sort of tone. It just didn't fit into the overall tone of what this movie was. And there was the odd scene here and there which I kind of liked, and along with the soundtrack as well, the score, I didn't mind the score. And there'd be this odd moment where it was like, oh, I'm liking this, but this really doesn't fit into the overall experience that I'm watching, but I like it.
I like it a lot.
And because the script plays into that kind of very generic 90s cliched sort of superhero movie that we've seen 100 times before, even the script somewhat works to a degree, because it feels like that is what they're aiming for with the tone of the movie and the direction of the film. And you'll also get that odd moment with the script as well. For example, there'll be a sort of a moment where a character sort of utters the line, oh, you know, E.T. won't be phoning home from in here, and they're in a bunker. And it'll be like, you know, that kind of made me chuckle a little bit, but I could just imagine in that moment, Kelly Marcel, who also wrote the screenplay for The Last Dance, going, look at me, aren't I clever? And that's just how it felt, because just how the overall writing of this movie just felt. You'd have that odd moment where it was like, you know, that actually kind of did something to me emotionally, like it actually got a chuckle out of me. And there'll be another moment where Venom sort of says something along the lines of horsepower. You could probably guess which scene that is. And that was another moment where it was like, I could just imagine Kelly Marcel going, look at me, look what I thought of there, you know.
Funny fucker, aren't you?
Like, the writing is so basic and generic that just in those moments, that's how it kind of felt to me. And yeah, I mean, this is an exposition dump, the entire movie, where, you know, the expository dialogue is just, it was overwhelming, actually. It got to a point where this film really did feel just lazy, just how this entire movie was sort of put together, and how it was written, and sort of just how everything played out. Everything about it felt very lazy, and it got to a point where I felt like I was being insulted, but at the same time I was like, Ashley, turn your brain off, just have some fun. But I still couldn't have fun, because there was nothing in this movie to really kind of immerse me into it, where I could really give a shit about what actually was going on. Like, I could tell when I should have been having fun, and there were some really crazy fun action scenes in the way that they are designed to be fun, but I just couldn't get on board with this. I really couldn't. It's one of those experiences, actually, and there's been a number of movies in recent years that I felt have done this. A lot of them are Marvel movies, where I feel like the pacing has been engineered in a way. So during the editing process, and maybe some involvement from the studio, they've gone at what it is they've attempted. They've looked at it and gone, no, we need something that's got a hell of a lot more energy, that's going to get, you know, bums in seats, and people are just going to keep coming back over and over again to watch this movie and spend some money. And that's how it felt. There's this momentum behind the movie that felt forced. And again, I kind of felt that by just how I felt the story was constructed and how the story played out. Like, I feel like they were really attempting something more here with the story, and you get hints of that with the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom. But as I said, it doesn't fully come to life, and I think that in part is down to sort of how the movie is constructed, how the story is constructed and how it plays out. It has that energy behind it, that pace behind it, which doesn't feel natural because there's no story there. Like I said, this is not a complex movie. It's very straightforward, yet it just kind of feels like it's rushing through a series of events just to get to the conclusion, which you kind of guess what's going to happen, and you've just got a bunch of underdeveloped characters that you don't really end up caring for because they are just so incredibly underdeveloped. But again, it somewhat plays into what I think they were aiming for when it comes to these movies, which is that kind of the 90s superhero kind of, aesthetic, maybe. And it's not like I didn't mind the characters within this movie. I actually didn't mind them because of how they were being brought to life, but they just didn't really have time to breathe and to sort of really allow us to get to know these characters. And again, I'm not saying I wanted something really incredibly deep here and complex. I wanted fun. I wanted to be entertained. But it didn't do a really good job at getting me behind any of these characters, to sort of really have some sort of, for me to just care about them. It's just a series of events that kind of loosely sort of play out. And, and everything has that kind of almost like a randomness to it at times. And yeah, it kind of just feels like a last minute sort of, we need to just wrap this up now and here it is kind of thing. And yeah. So yeah, they're my thoughts on Venom: The Last Dance. I actually didn't hate this movie. It was just a very dull experience. And there were aspects about it that I somewhat liked. There'd be moments of the score that I really appreciated. You'd have certain character moments that kind of sort of gave hints at what it was they were attempting to do with the story and sort of at injecting that kind of big beating heart. And I just really liked the dynamic, the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom. There are moments where I really did chuckle. I found this relationship to be quite compelling, and it was like, I kind of really want to watch the first two now just to see how that evolves. But yeah, look, enough of rambling on from me. That's what I thought of Venom: The Last Dance, and I will be giving Venom: The Last Dance a 4 out of 10. So yeah, they're my thoughts on Venom: The Last Dance, but what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. I've got a bunch of reviews planned and lined up for the channel. It's going to be quite a busy week for me, but my next review will be for Heretic, which I'm going to catch tonight. I'm really looking forward to that. I also want to catch Anora and Jura number 2. There is just so many, and I'm hoping to catch up now over the next week. And so yeah, thanks again for watching, and another big thank you as well to all those that have subscribed or just interacted with the channel, whether it be liking or disliking and commenting. It means an awful lot. I'm still overwhelmed by just how many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek rambling on about film and TV, but it does mean an awful lot. So yeah, thanks again for watching guys. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.